The gunshot that tore through Blackwater Saloon silenced every soul inside, except for Abram Quincy, who merely sipped his whiskey as if the blast were nothing more than a door slamming shut. The year was 1885, and Sweetwater Valley, Arizona Territory, had seen its share of violence, but what followed that gunshot would become the talk of the town for years to come. "You missed," Abram said calmly, setting his glass down and turning to face the trembling man who'd just attempted to put a bullet between his eyes. "I don't miss," the shooter stammered, his face pale as chalk. "That witch woman put a spell on my gun." Abram's weathered hand moved faster than a rattlesnake strike, drawing his Colt and placing a neat hole through the man's hat, sending it flying off his head without grazing a single hair. "Next one goes lower." "Now get out before I forget my manners," Abram said, his voice carrying the weight of a man who'd made peace with death long ago. The would-be assassin stumbled backward through the batwing doors, leaving behind nothing but the lingering smell of gunpowder and fear. "That witch woman he's talking about," drawled a voice from the corner. "That'd be Beatrice Morgan, I reckon." Abram holstered his weapon. "Don't much care who she is. Man's a fool to blame his poor aim on a lady." "Ain't just any lady," said the bartender, wiping down the counter. "Used to be the belle of the valley, she did. Beautiful as a sunrise, that Beatrice. Now they say she's lost her charm. Gone strange after that smallpox took her family 5 years back, lives alone in that cabin up Devil's Creek." "That's so." Abram replied, uninterested, tossing back the remainder of his whiskey. "Folks steer clear of her now, say her face got scarred something terrible, say she deals in herbs and potions that ain't natural." Abram stood, dropping coins on the counter. "Reckon folks say a lot of things." Outside, the Arizona sun beat down relentlessly on the dusty Main Street. Abram adjusted his hat and headed toward the general store. He'd been in Sweetwater Valley less than a week, driving a herd north from Mexico for the Diamond Q Ranch. The trail had been hard, but the pay was good, and his plan was simple: stock up on supplies, rest his horse, and move on before trouble found him. Trouble, however, had other ideas. "You the cowboy who stood up for the witch?" A heavyset man with a sheriff's badge blocked Abram's path. "I'm the man who doesn't appreciate having his drink interrupted by poor marksmanship," Abram replied evenly, the sheriff's eyes narrowed. "We don't need outsiders stirring up problems. That woman brings nothing but grief to this town. Seems to me she minds her own business up in those hills." "Might be a lesson in that." The sheriff stepped closer. "Word of advice, cowboy, finish your business and move on. Folk around here don't take kindly to strangers defending what they don't understand." Abram tipped his hat. "Never been one for taking advice, sheriff, especially the unwelcome kind." The sheriff's face darkened, but he stepped aside. "Your funeral." Abram continued toward the general store, feeling the eyes of townspeople tracking his movement. He'd never intended to stay in Sweetwater Valley longer than necessary, but something about the way they spoke of this Beatrice Morgan didn't sit right with him. Inside the store, a bell jangled as he entered. A young woman behind the counter looked up, then quickly averted her eyes. "Afternoon," Abram said, "looking to restock before I head out." "You're that cowboy," she said quietly. Abram sighed. "News travels fast." "It's a small town," she replied, finally meeting his gaze. "I'm Amelia. My pa owns this store." "Pleasure," Abram nodded. "I need coffee, tobacco, ammunition for a Colt .45, and whatever information you might have about Beatrice Morgan that doesn't involve witchcraft." Amelia's eyes widened. "Why would you want to know about her? Curious by nature." He placed his hat on the counter. "And I don't much care for how folk talk about someone who isn't around to defend themselves." Amelia hesitated, then began gathering his supplies. She wasn't always an outcast. Beatrice was the school teacher here before the sickness came, kind to everyone. "My ma said she had the most beautiful singing voice in the territory." "What changed?" "Smallpox swept through 5 years ago, took her husband and both their children, left her face different." Amelia lowered her voice. "She retreated to that cabin, started growing herbs, making remedies. Some folk say they work too well to be natural. Sounds like she found a way to be useful despite her grief." "Maybe," Amelia shrugged. "But then animals started dying near her property, crops failing, and when Jeremiah Wilson's son took sick after drinking water from her creek, she trailed off. Coincidence ain't causation, Abram stated. Perhaps, but people need someone to blame when things go wrong. She wrapped his purchases in brown paper. That'll be $2.40. Abram paid her. This Devil's Creek, how does one find it? Amelia's face grew serious. Mister, if you're thinking of going up there, I'd reconsider. Not because of any superstition, but because Beatrice Morgan values her solitude. She fires warning shots at anyone who approaches. Abram smiled slightly. Sounds like my kind of woman. You're not like most men who pass through here. Been told that before, he replied, gathering his supplies. Much obliged for the conversation, Miss Amelia. Outside, Abram loaded his purchases onto his horse, a sturdy roan gelding named Copper. The sun was beginning its westward descent, painting the distant mountains in shades of purple and gold. Common sense told him to find a room for the night and leave town at first light, but something about this Beatrice Morgan story pulled at him. He led Copper toward the town's edge, where he stopped at a small creek to water the horse. As he crouched by the water, he noticed a young boy watching him from behind a cottonwood tree. Don't reckon I'm interesting enough to spy on, Abram called out. The boy, perhaps 10 years old, stepped forward cautiously. You going to see the witch lady? I'm considering paying a visit to Miss Morgan, Abram corrected. My pa says she cursed our town. The boy moved closer. But my ma got real sick last winter and nothing the doctor gave her helped. Grandmother took me to see Miss Beatrice in secret. She gave us a tea that made ma better. Abram raised an eyebrow. That's so, the boy nodded earnestly. But we can't tell nobody, pa would be furious. Seems to me a woman who helps people doesn't deserve to be called a witch. I don't think she is one, the boy said, looking over his shoulder nervously. But her face is scary, all puckered and red on one side. Scars don't make someone evil, son. Remember that. The boy kicked at a stone. If you're going up there, follow this creek until it forks. Take the left path uphill. When you see 3 tall pines standing together, her cabin's just beyond. Abram tipped his hat. Appreciate the directions. Mister, the boy called as Abram mounted Copper. If you see her, tell her Tommy's ma is still doing well. I'll do that. As Abram rode out of town, the setting sun cast long shadows across the land. He knew he was probably making a mistake. Getting involved in local disputes never ended well for a drifter. But something about the story of this woman, cast out by a town she once served, resonated with him. An hour later, the trail grew steeper, the vegetation thicker. True to the boy's word, a fork appeared in the creek, and Abram guided Copper to the left. The terrain grew rocky, forcing him to dismount and lead the horse by the reins. As dusk settled in, he spotted the 3 tall pines standing sentinel against the darkening sky. Beyond them, nestled in a small clearing, stood a modest cabin with smoke curling from its chimney. A small vegetable garden stretched to one side, and various plants hung drying from the porch rafters. He was still 30 yards away when the crack of a rifle split the evening air. Dirt kicked up near Copper's hooves, causing the horse to rear. That's far enough, called a woman's voice, strong despite its distance. Next shot won't be a warning. Abram raised his hands slowly. My name's Abram Quincy. I'm not looking for trouble, madam, just a conversation. I don't welcome visitors. Turn around and go back to town. Can't do that just yet. Abram remained still, hands visible. Tommy asked me to tell you his ma is still doing well. A long silence followed. Finally, approach slowly. Leave your gun belt on that fallen log. Any sudden moves and I'll put a hole through you. Abram did as instructed, unbuckling his gun belt and draping it over the log. He advanced toward the cabin, the tension in his shoulders easing only slightly when he spotted the woman on the porch, rifle still aimed at his chest. She stood straight-backed, her dress simple but clean. In the fading light, he couldn't make out her features clearly, only that she had dark hair pulled back from her face. That's close enough, she said when he was 10 paces from the porch steps. What do you want? Like I said, a conversation. He kept his voice even. Seems you're quite the topic of discussion down in Sweetwater Valley. I don't care what they say about me. There was a bitterness in her voice that couldn't be hidden, figured as much. Still, thought you might want to know not everyone believes the talk. The rifle lowered slightly. You're not from around here. No, madam, just passing through. Had a man try to shoot me in the saloon today, claimed you'd hexed his gun when he missed. A sound escaped her that might have been a laugh or a scoff. Foolishness, my thought exactly. Abram remained still. Might be easier to continue this conversation without a rifle between us. She seemed to consider this, then slowly lowered the weapon. I've got stew on. You look like you could use a meal before heading back down. Much obliged. As he climbed the porch steps, she stepped back into the shadows of the doorway. I should warn you, my appearance disturbs some people. I've seen my share of scars, Miss Morgan, including plenty of my own. She stepped into the light then, and Abram could see what the townsfolk feared. The left side of her face bore the unmistakable marks of smallpox-pitted scars that pulled at her eye and distorted her once smooth skin. But what struck him more were her eyes, clear, intelligent, and defiant. Beatrice Morgan, she said, extending her hand. He took it without hesitation. Abram Quincy. Inside, the cabin was neat and well organized. Bundles of herbs hung from the rafters, and shelves lined with jars of various contents occupied one wall. A pot bubbled over the fire, filling the room with the aroma of rabbit stew. You can tie your horse out back, she said, setting the rifle aside. There's water and feed in the lean-to. While Abram sought a copper, Beatrice ladled stew into bowls and cut thick slices from a loaf of bread. When he returned, she had set the table and poured 2 cups of dark coffee. You mentioned Tommy, she said as they sat. How is the boy? Seems well enough. Worried about his pa finding out they visited you, Beatrice nodded. His mother had pneumonia. The town doctor was giving her laudanum for the pain, but nothing to fight the infection. I provided a poultice and tea of mullein and coltsfoot. Sounds more like medicine than witchcraft. She studied him over her cup. Why are you here, Mr. Quincy? Curiosity about the local witch, curiosity about why a town would turn on someone who helps them. People fear what they don't understand, she replied, and fear turns quickly to hatred. The smallpox, he said carefully. It took your family. Something flickered in her eyes, pain so deep it made him regret the question. My husband, James, our daughter Elizabeth, who was 7. And our son, William, just 3. Her voice didn't waver, but her hand tightened around her cup. I survived, obviously, though many days I wished I hadn't. I'm sorry for your loss. It was 5 years ago. She looked away. When I recovered enough to leave my bed, people couldn't bear to look at me, not just because of the scars, but because I lived while their loved ones died. The school board asked for my resignation. Friends crossed the street to avoid speaking to me. So you came up here. I had nowhere else to go. This cabin belonged to an old woman who taught me about plants years ago. She had no family, so it passed to me. Beatrice gestured to the herbs around them. I found purpose in continuing her work. Some brave souls still come when modern medicine fails them, but they come in secret, afraid of being associated with me. Abram ate his stew thoughtfully. Yet you stay. This is my home, she said simply. Where else would I go? They ate in silence for a while, the crackle of the fire the only sound between them. There was something about her quiet dignity that touched something deep in Abram, a recognition of a kindred spirit. You never said what brought you to Sweetwater Valley, Beatrice finally said. Driving cattle north from Mexico, stopped for supplies. And yet you rode all the way up here to see a woman the town considers dangerous. Abram set down his spoon. Never put much stock in what others think, prefer to make my own judgments. And what judgment have you made about me, Mr. Quincy? That you're a woman who survived more than most could bear, that you found a way to be useful despite being wronged, and that Sweetwater Valley is foolish to waste what you have to offer. A slight flush colored her unscarred cheek. You're an unusual man. Been told that before. He smiled slightly. Might I ask you something, Miss Morgan? You can ask. Would you consider returning to town, not to stay necessarily, but to show them you're not afraid? Sometimes confronting fear is the only way to overcome it. She stiffened. I've tried. 3 years ago I went down for supplies. Children threw stones at me. A woman fainted at the sight of my face. The shopkeeper refused to serve me. Things might be different now. They're not. She stood and collected their empty bowls. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Quincy, but Sweetwater Valley has made its feelings clear. I've made my peace with that. Have you? He asked quietly. She paused, her back to him. It's getting late. You should start back before it's fully dark. The trail can be treacherous. Actually, Abram said, I was hoping I might impose on your hospitality for the night. My horse could use the rest, and I'd be grateful for a spot on your floor. Beatrice turned to face him, suspicion clear in her eyes. Why would you want to stay? Because I'm tired, he said honestly. And because I find your company more agreeable than what awaits me in town." She studied him for a long moment. "There's a lean-to connected to the stable. You can sleep there." "Much obliged." Later, as Abram spread his bedroll on the clean, swept floor of the lean-to, he pondered the strange turn his journey had taken. He'd expected to be miles from Sweetwater Valley by now, continuing north with the herd. Instead, he found himself drawn into the story of a woman abandoned by the community she once served. There was something about Beatrice Morgan, a resilience, a quiet strength that called to him. In his 32 years, Abram had known many women, but few who carried their burdens with such dignity. Sleep came slowly that night, his thoughts full of her voice, her hands, and the pain he'd glimpsed behind her careful composure. Morning brought clear skies and birdsong. Abram awoke to find Copper already fed and watered. Outside the cabin, Beatrice knelt in her garden, harvesting vegetables for breakfast. "You're up early," he commented, approaching. She glanced up, squinting against the sun. "Old habits, these need picking before the day's heat." "May I help?" She hesitated, then handed him a small basket. "The beans on the far trellis are ready." They worked side by side in comfortable silence. Abram found himself stealing glances at her profile, the graceful line of her neck, the deft movements of her hands. In the morning light, he could see that, despite the scarring, she remained a handsome woman. Her eyes were a deep brown, framed by thick lashes, and her unscarred features were delicately formed. Over a breakfast of eggs and garden vegetables, Abram proposed an idea. "I'm heading to the general store for supplies before I leave town. Would you consider writing a list of things you need? I could bring them back before I continue north." Beatrice set down her fork. "Why would you do that?" "Because it seems the decent thing to do." "I don't accept charity, Mr. Quincy." "Not charity," he countered. "I'll bring you supplies. You can provide me with some of your herbal remedies for the trail. Fair exchange." She considered him, her expression guarded. "You're persistent. Been called worse." A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, the first he'd seen. It transformed her face, softening the hard edges grief had carved there. "Very well," she finally agreed. "I'll make a list." After breakfast, she wrote out her needs while Abram saddled Copper. The list was modest: flour, sugar, coffee, salt, needles, thread, and a few other necessities. "I should be back by midday," he told her, mounting up. "Mr. Quincy," she called as he turned to leave. "Why are you really doing this?" He considered the question. "Because everyone deserves kindness, Miss Morgan, especially those who have been shown too little of it." In town, Abram's appearance at the general store caused a stir. Word of his visit to the witch had spread overnight, and customers fell silent as he entered. "Morning," he greeted Amelia, who watched him with wide eyes. "I need these items, please." He handed over Beatrice's list. Amelia scanned it, recognition dawning on her face. "These aren't for you." "They are now that I'm paying for them," he replied evenly. The store had grown uncomfortably quiet, every ear straining to hear their exchange. "Is there a problem with filling this order?" Abram asked, his voice carrying to the far corners of the store. An older man stepped forward, clearly Amelia's father by their shared features. "We don't serve that woman here anymore." "You're serving me," Abram corrected, "and I'm paying good money." "Your money's no good if it goes to help her," spat a man by the door. "That witch nearly killed my boy." Abram turned slowly. "You'd be Jeremiah Wilson, I take it." "I am." The man puffed up his chest. "And my son took sick after drinking from her creek." "Creeks run downhill, Mr. Wilson." If there was something in that water, might be worth asking what washed into it from above. "Perhaps from your cattle pasture." Wilson's face reddened. "Are you accusing me of not accusing, observing?" Abram turned back to the shopkeeper. "Now, about those supplies." The tension in the store was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, the owner sighed. "Amelia, fill the order." To Abram, he added, "But this is the last time. We won't be party to supporting her presence here." "Seems to me," Abram said as Amelia gathered the items, "that Beatrice Morgan has more right to be in this valley than most. She taught your children, nursed your sick, and lost everything to the same disease that threatened you all. She's changed," a woman whispered from behind a shelf. "Something in her died with her family." "Wouldn't you change?" Abram asked quietly. "Wouldn't losing everything alter something in you?" He looked around the store. "She hasn't changed as much as you think. She's still healing the sick, those brave enough to seek her help. Tommy's mother seems grateful enough." A gasp ran through the store and a woman in the corner paled. Tommy's mother, Abram, guessed. "That's right," he continued. "Your secrets are safe with her. She doesn't speak ill of any of you, though God knows she has reason." "You don't understand our ways," the shopkeeper growled. "You're just passing through." "I understand human decency," Abram replied, "and the lack of it." Amelia finished gathering the supplies, her hands trembling slightly. "That'll be $5.75. Abram paid, then added extra coins, and a pound of those peppermint sticks. He nodded toward the glass jar on the counter. Amelia glanced at her father, who gave a reluctant nod. She added the candy to his package. "You're making a mistake, Cowboy," Wilson called as Abram gathered his purchases. "That woman brings nothing but misfortune." Abram paused at the door. "The only misfortune I see is a town too afraid to recognize the goodness still living among them." He tipped his hat. "Good day to you all." As he loaded the supplies onto Copper, the sheriff approached, thumbs hooked in his belt. "Thought you'd be gone by now," he said, leaving soon enough, with supplies for the Morgan woman. It wasn't a question. Abram faced him squarely. "Is there a law against trading in Sweetwater Valley?" "No law," the sheriff admitted, "but a word of caution. You've stirred up feelings best left settled. This town has its reasons for keeping its distance from her." "Fear isn't a reason, Sheriff. It's an excuse." The lawman's eyes narrowed. "You seem mighty invested in a woman you just met." "I recognize injustice when I see it." "Be that as it may," the sheriff said, "I suggest you deliver those goods and move on. Sweetwater Valley takes care of its own problems. Seems to me you create more problems than you solve." Abram mounted his horse. "But don't worry. I'll be moving on soon enough." The ride back to Beatrice's cabin gave Abram time to reflect on the town's reaction. Their fear ran deeper than superstition. It was guilt, he realized. Guilt for abandoning one of their own when she needed them most, now justified through rumors and whispered accusations. Beatrice was waiting on the porch when he arrived, a basket of freshly picked herbs beside her. She stood as he dismounted. "I wasn't certain you'd return," she admitted. "Said I would." He began unloading the supplies. Town was exactly as welcoming as you might expect. They tried to refuse service. They tried. He smiled slightly, didn't succeed. Together they carried everything inside. As Beatrice unpacked the items, she paused at the peppermint sticks. "I didn't ask for these," she said, holding the paper package. "Thought you might enjoy them." Abram removed his hat, suddenly feeling foolish. "Presumptuous of me." Beatrice touched the candy almost reverently. Peppermint was Elizabeth's favorite. "I used to bring her a stick when I returned from town." Her voice grew soft. "I haven't had one since." "I'm sorry," Abram said quickly. "I didn't mean to bring painful memories." "No," she shook her head. "It's a good memory, thank you." She carefully set the candy aside and continued unpacking. "I've prepared some remedies for you, as agreed. Yarrow salve for cuts, willow bark for pain, and a tea mixture for stomach ailments. Appreciate it." "When will you be leaving?" she asked, not meeting his eyes. Abram hesitated. "Was planning to head out this afternoon. But I've been thinking I might stay in the area a bit longer." "Why?" The word came sharp, suspicious. He chose his words carefully. "The cattle drive I was with is likely in Colorado by now. No point in trying to catch up. Thought I might look for work locally for a while. In Sweetwater Valley. After what you've seen, plenty of ranches in the territory that need good hands." Beatrice studied him, her eyes searching his face. "You feel sorry for me, is that it?" "No, madam," he replied honestly. "I admire you, there's a difference." The directness of his answer seemed to catch her off guard. She turned away, busying herself with arranging supplies on her shelves. "The Diamond Q Ranch might be hiring," she said after a moment. "About 10 miles northwest of town. The owner, Jacob Quinn, is fair-minded. Doesn't listen much to town gossip. I'll look into it." Abram replaced his hat. "Before I go, is there anything else you need help with around here? Repairs, chopping wood?" She hesitated, then relented. "The roof leaks over the back room. I've been meaning to fix it, but..." "Say no more." The rest of the day passed in companionable work. Abram repaired the roof, split a cord of firewood, and helped Beatrice harvest more vegetables from her garden. As they worked, the initial tension between them eased, giving way to comfortable conversation. He learned she had come to Arizona from Boston as a young woman, eager for adventure. She'd met James Morgan, a shopkeeper's son with dreams of ranching, and they'd built a life together before the smallpox took it all away. In turn, Abram shared pieces of his own past growing up on a small farm in Texas, losing his parents young, making his way as a cowhand across the Southwest. He didn't mention the darker years, the time spent riding with men whose morals bent with the direction of the wind. Some stories weren't meant for daylight. As evening approached, Beatrice prepared another meal, this time venison stew with biscuits. "You should stay the night again," she offered as they ate. "It's too late to start for the Diamond Q now." Abram nodded, grateful. "I'll head out at first light." After supper, they sat on the porch, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. The night was cool, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of pine and sage. "Tell me something," Abram said after a comfortable silence. "If you could have anything right now, what would it be?" Beatrice considered the question. "Peace," she finally answered. "Not just solitude, I have plenty of that, but true peace, the kind that comes from belonging somewhere, being accepted despite." She gestured vaguely toward her scarred face. "You belong here as much as anyone," he said. "More than most, I'd wager." "The land doesn't mind my scars," she agreed. "Only people do. Not all people." Their eyes met in the dim light, and something passed between them, a recognition, a possibility. Beatrice looked away first. "It's getting late. I should turn in." "Of course." Abram stood. "Thank you for your hospitality, Miss Morgan." "Beatrice," she said quietly. "My friends called me Beatrice," he smiled. "Good night, Beatrice." "Good night, Abram." The next morning dawned clear and bright. Abram saddled Copper early, preparing for the ride to Diamond Q Ranch. Beatrice provided him with directions and a small package of food for the journey. "I can't thank you enough for your help," she said as he mounted up. "No thanks needed." He settled into the saddle. "I'll stop by again if that's all right. Let you know how things went at the ranch." "I'd like that," she replied, and he was pleased to see another small smile grace her features. The Diamond Q turned out to be exactly as Beatrice had described, a sizable operation run by Jacob Quinn, a gruff but fair man who cared more about a person's work ethic than their background. When Abram mentioned his experience with cattle, Quinn hired him on the spot. "We're short-handed since 2 of my boys headed to California," Quinn explained. "Pays fair, works hard. You can bunk in the ranch house with the other hands." Over the next few weeks, Abram settled into a routine. The work was demanding but satisfying, and the other ranch hands, while initially wary of the newcomer, gradually accepted him after seeing his skill with horses and cattle. Every Sunday, his day off, Abram rode to Beatrice's cabin. Each visit, he brought small gifts: a book from Quinn's library, seeds for her garden, a length of bright fabric that had caught his eye in the general store. He took care never to arrive empty-handed in a way that might suggest charity, always framing his gifts as exchanges for the herbal remedies she provided. Their friendship grew with each visit. Slowly, Beatrice began to lower the walls she'd built around herself. She laughed more easily, spoke more freely of her past, and even sang once a lullaby she'd sung to her children, her voice as beautiful as the townspeople had claimed. For his part, Abram found himself increasingly drawn to her. It wasn't just sympathy or admiration anymore. There was something about Beatrice Morgan that called to him on a deeper level: her resilience, her intelligence, the gentle way she tended both plants and animals. The scars that so disturbed the townspeople barely registered in his perception of her anymore. When he looked at her, he saw only Beatrice. On a warm Sunday in late summer, nearly 2 months after his arrival in Sweetwater Valley, Abram brought a special gift: a small silver locket he'd purchased from a traveling peddler who passed through the ranch. "It's beautiful," Beatrice said as she opened it, revealing the empty interior, "but I have no photographs to put inside." "Perhaps someday," Abram replied, "or perhaps it can hold a memory instead." She smiled, fastening it around her neck. "Thank you." They spent the day as they usually did, working in her garden, preparing a meal together, talking of small things and large. As evening approached, Abram found himself reluctant to leave. "I should be getting back," he said finally, though he made no move toward his horse. Beatrice stood close beside him on the porch, her eyes on the setting sun. "Yes, I suppose you should." Neither moved. "Beatrice," he began, uncertain how to express what had been growing in his heart these past weeks. "Don't," she said softly, "don't say something you'll regret." "The only thing I regret," he replied, turning to face her, is that it took me 32 years to find you. Her eyes widened, a mixture of hope and fear crossing her features. Abram, I can't be what you deserve. I think that's for me to decide, he said gently. And I've decided that you're exactly what I want. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, and after a moment's hesitation, she responded, her hand coming up to rest against his chest. When they parted, her eyes remained closed for a heartbeat longer. This is madness, she whispered. Perhaps, he agreed, but it's the most sensible madness I've ever known. That night, for the first time, Abram didn't sleep in the lean-to. Instead, he stayed with Beatrice, holding her close as she spoke of her fears, her dreams, and the loneliness that had been her constant companion these past 5 years. In the quiet darkness, they found comfort in each other, two souls who had known pain finding unexpected joy in shared touches and whispered promises. As weeks turned to months, Abram divided his time between the Diamond Q and Beatrice's cabin. The arrangement raised eyebrows among the other ranch hands, but Quinn asked no questions, concerned only that the work was done well and on time. Autumn painted the hills in fiery colors, and with it came change to Sweetwater Valley. Word spread of a cowboy who'd taken up with the witch woman, and curiosity began to overcome fear. First came the brave ones, a mother with a colicky baby, a miner with an infected wound seeking Beatrice's remedies when conventional medicine failed them. Abram was present during one such visit, a cold October afternoon when a frantic father arrived carrying his daughter, burning with fever. Doctor says it's scarlet fever, the man explained, desperation in his eyes. Says there's nothing to be done but wait and pray. But my neighbor's boy recovered after you treated him last spring. Please, I know what they say about you in town, but I can't lose her. Beatrice took the child without hesitation. For hours, she worked tirelessly, applying cool compresses, administering herbal teas, monitoring the girl's breathing. Abram assisted as best he could, fetching water, building up the fire, offering encouragement to the distraught father. By dawn, the fever had broken. The child, though weak, opened her eyes and asked for water. The father wept openly. How can I ever repay you? There's no debt, Beatrice assured him. Just take good care of her. As the man prepared to leave with his recovering daughter, he turned to Beatrice. I was wrong about you. We all were, she offered a small smile. Take her home, she'll need rest and plenty of fluids. After they'd gone, Abram found Beatrice sitting exhausted by the fire. You're remarkable, he told her, sitting beside her and taking her hand in his. I only did what anyone with knowledge would do. That's not true, and you know it. He squeezed her hand. You helped despite knowing how they've treated you. That takes a special kind of strength. She leaned against him. Having you here makes me stronger. The next Sunday, Abram arrived at her cabin with an unusual request. Come to town with me, he said. Beatrice stiffened. You know I can't. Things are changing, Beatrice. People are talking about the children you've helped, the illnesses you've cured. Whispers don't change hearts, she replied, turning away. Maybe not. He moved to stand before her. But showing them the woman I see might. And what woman is that? She asked, a tremor in her voice. The bravest, kindest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. He took her hands in his. The only woman I see when I look at you, tears welled in her eyes. You're asking too much. I'm asking you to trust me, he said simply. As I trust you. After a long moment, she nodded. All right. The journey to town was tense, Beatrice growing quieter with each mile. As they approached the outskirts of Sweetwater Valley, she pulled her horse to a stop. I can't, she whispered, her face pale beneath her bonnet. Abram guided his horse alongside hers. You can, and you won't be alone this time. They continued side by side, drawing curious stares as they rode down the main street. People stopped to watch, whispers following in their wake. Abram led them to the general store, dismounting first and offering Beatrice his hand. With visible effort, she straightened her shoulders and accepted his help, keeping her face forward as they entered the store. Inside, conversations halted abruptly. Amelia stood frozen behind the counter, her father emerging from the back room at the sudden silence. Miss Morgan, the shopkeeper said, surprise evident in his voice. It's been some time. Mr. Peterson, Beatrice acknowledged, her voice steadier than Abram had expected. I've come to purchase supplies. The storekeeper hesitated, glancing around at the watching customers. Then his eyes fell on a woman in the corner, the mother of the girl Beatrice had saved from scarlet fever. The woman stepped forward. "My Emily is running and playing again because of you, Miss Morgan. The doctor said it was a miracle, but my husband told me what you did." A murmur ran through the store. "My Thomas's arm healed clean after that mining accident," volunteered another man. "No infection, barely a scar." "Your poultice did what the doctor's treatments couldn't." One by one, others spoke up testimonies to Beatrice's healing skills, admissions of secret visits to her cabin, confessions of gratitude previously unspoken. Peterson cleared his throat. "Well, it seems we owe you an apology, Miss Morgan. Your custom is welcome here." He turned to his daughter. "Amelia, please assist Miss Morgan with whatever she needs." As they shopped, the initial tension gradually eased. People approached cautiously, some to thank Beatrice personally, others simply to introduce themselves. Not everyone was welcoming. Several customers left rather than share the store with her, but it was a beginning. Outside afterward, as they loaded their purchases, the sheriff approached. "Miss Morgan," he nodded. "Good to see you back in town." "Sheriff," she replied coolly. "Been hearing good things about your medicines," he continued, somewhat awkwardly. "My rheumatism's been acting up something fierce lately. Doctor's powders don't touch the pain. I was wondering if you might have something that could help." Beatrice's expression softened slightly. "Willow bark tea helps many of my patients. I could prepare some for you." "Much obliged." The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "And for what it's worth, I'm sorry for how things have been. Fear makes fools of the best of us sometimes." It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was a start. As they rode back to her cabin that evening, Beatrice seemed lighter somehow, as if a burden had begun to lift. "Thank you," she said as they crested the hill that would lead them home, "for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." "Always," he promised. Winter settled over Sweetwater Valley, bringing short days and long nights perfect for planning futures. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling gently outside the cabin windows, Abram asked Beatrice to be his wife. "Are you certain?" she asked, her eyes searching his. "A life with me won't be easy, even with the town beginning to accept me." "I've never been more certain of anything," he replied. "I love you, Beatrice Morgan. Scars and all, past and future, I love every part of you." They were married on New Year's Day, 1886, in a small ceremony at her cabin. Jacob Quinn stood as witness, along with Amelia from the general store and, surprisingly, Tommy and his parents. The town minister performed the service, his initial reluctance overcome by Quinn's persuasive personality and Abram's unwavering insistence. Spring brought new beginnings. With Abram's encouragement, Beatrice began holding regular clinic hours in town, using a small room behind the general store that Peterson offered at her reduced rent. Gradually, her practice grew, suspicion giving way to respect as her knowledge and skills proved their worth time and again. Abram continued working at the Diamond Q, but with an eye toward the future. He and Beatrice began saving to purchase land of their own, dreaming of a small ranch where they could raise horses and continue her healing work. By summer's end, they had enough to make an offer on a modest property not far from her cabin, 15 acres with a sturdy house, a barn in need of repair, and a stream running clear and sweet along the eastern boundary. "It needs work," Abram acknowledged as they walked the property after the sale was complete, "but it has good bones." "It's perfect," Beatrice said, her eyes shining. "Room for horses, space for my garden and herbs, and close enough to town for people to reach us when they need help." "Our home," he said, pulling her close. "Our home," she echoed, resting her head against his chest. As they stood together on their land, the setting sun painting the western sky in shades of gold and crimson, Abram reflected on the strange twists of fate that had led him to this moment. A missed shot in a saloon, a whispered accusation, a curiosity that had led him up a mountain trail to find the woman who would change his life. In town, they still whispered about Beatrice Morgan, now Beatrice Quincy, but the nature of those whispers had changed. They spoke of her skill with herbs, her gentle way with children, her quiet dignity in the face of past rejection. And they spoke too of the cowboy who had seen beyond her scars to the woman beneath, who had stood beside her when others turned away. "What are you thinking about?" Beatrice asked, looking up at him. About how lucky I am, Abram replied, and about something the bartender said the day I first heard your name. What was that? He said you'd lost your charm. Abram smiled, touching the side of her face where the smallpox had left its mark, but he was wrong. You're the only woman I still see, the only one I ever want to see for all the days of my life. Beatrice's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. And you're the only man who ever truly saw me, she whispered. Not my scars, not my past, but me. As twilight deepened around them, they walked hand in hand toward the house that would become their home. Two souls who had found in each other not just love, but redemption, healing, and the promise of a future brighter than either had dared to imagine. In Sweetwater Valley, Arizona Territory, they still tell the story of Beatrice and Abram Quincy, the scarred healer and the cowboy who loved her, as an example of how true sight comes not from the eyes, but from the heart. And how sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with a whisper and end with a truth that stands the test of time.